Covering the Stranger of Paradise DLCs was something that I was on the fence about because on one hand, I thought the game concluded perfectly, it didn't need more story to tell, but on the other, I did enjoy the game, so naturally I was intrigued by its extra content. My curiosity ended up overshadowing my skepticism, so here we are. Consider this an expansion of my last video on the base game. If they want to milk content, I'll do the same. Before we dive right in though, a quick little recap on the ending of the original release. So main protagonist Jack Garland managed to free the world of Cornelia from Lufenia's vile grasp and then decided to become the biggest terror he could be to the world to elicit the rise of the Warriors of Light. Heroes that shall arrive when darkness veils the world. As Jack patiently waits in his throne room, they eventually come to his doorstep and he's like, alright, they're here. They're gonna eliminate me and the world's gonna be in good hands. We don't get to see that happen, but that's what we presume as the credits start rolling. Tragic, but masterful. Now the DLCs pick up right from that conclusion, which is exactly what I feared because I didn't want to see this fight go down. Showing more is less in this case. Also, either we now play as the Warriors of Light to kill Jack and the DLC would be too short, or the Warriors get absolutely clapped. And Jack's like, oh wow, these guys are ass. Well shit. Jack then suddenly senses the presence of a divine being and goes to investigate. It turns out that something has awakened the legendary Dragon King, Bahamut. Our protagonists fill him in on the events of the base game while he provides some lore about himself, and that's really the core of this initial DLC. To progress the story, you essentially need to talk to Bahamut, and you do that by unlocking individual conversations. And in order to unlock the conversations, you need to cash in a certain number of dragon treasures, which are items that can be earned by completing missions on Bahamut difficulty. Whether that's old missions from the base game, or the quote-unquote new missions that consist of recycled boss battles and the same variety of arcade-style challenges that we've seen from this game's side missions.
Really?
I complained about the level design in the base game, but this is a new low. It's so blatant that they couldn't figure out how to make the gameplay organically accommodate the story. It's fine the first time to show Bahamut your courage and strength through his trial, but after that it's simply padding. This could have just been like a 5-minute cutscene with Bahamut because it ultimately boils down to Jack asking him to power up the Weenies of Light. But because there needed to be content, each subtopic, each couple sentences is locked behind an in-game paywall, making this DLC a couple hours in length. Now the rematch you eventually get with the Warrior of Light after he gets a power boost from Bahamut, it's a good fight. The best kind of fights are the challenging 1v1 human on human battles. I've seen some people talking about how they couldn't win without turning on extra mode and spamming overpower. That's one way to do it, but I don't eat at Weenie Hut Jr. I won this fight fair and square in a pure, raw sword fight. A true battle of honor. Though Jack bests the Warriors again, he finds greater hope that their improving strength will one day be enough to defeat him in future cycles, which concludes DLC 1. Very mediocre from a gameplay and narrative standpoint. I'll fully articulate my issues at the end of the video since they persist throughout all 3 expansions, so let's now move on to DLC number 2. Similar to Bahamut's appearance, the gang notices another strange phenomenon occurring in their world. Gateways to different dimensions start mysteriously opening up, which they have to look into. So the second expansion has you going through a rift labyrinth, a dungeon of some sorts. A handful of portals will be presented for you to choose to go through, each featuring a specific challenge, ranging from fighting a boss to surviving waves of enemies for a couple minutes. Completing these challenges will accumulate dimension points to progress to the labyrinth's next floor, and you need to reach floor 21 to progress to DLC 3. After every challenge, you will return to the Hall of Dark Crystal, which is essentially the hub for this DLC in particular. Here, you will have a dark elf that resembles Astos to be your host. In the base game, Astos did say that his kind were bioorganisms mass-produced to serve, so it was actually interesting to see that idea explored here. You can replenish on potions from him, and he can even summon monsters for you to tame and use in battle if you bring him summon stones. Since Jack is now Chaos, the Lord of Darkness, most of the monsters view him as their master, so you get to see a completely different side of them. Each has a fun, unique personality, and they even sometimes share their tragic lore with you that kinda humanizes them. For example, this unicorn talked about how humans hunted its kind for their horns to brew elixirs, and his friend had to sacrifice himself for it to escape. It was probably Jack before he became Chaos. Some of these creatures are freaky though. Like this firebomb wanted me to feed it with a hard nut. And after I did, it started saying things like, now every few floors you climb, you encounter the legendary sword fighter Gilgamesh. He will challenge you in a battle as he enjoys fighting before spouting out some exposition on what he thinks is happening with the rifts. Although I like the structure and design of this DLC better, these are still artificial objectives to get to the next story event for the sake of content.
You had your question. You'll have to beat the next one out of me.
Like, why can't they just keep talking? Because the gameplay loop demands that you go up additional floors to continue the conversation. This game's lucky its combat's fun, especially the boss battles. You fight Gilgamesh a total of 6 times throughout the 21 floors, and he'll have a second phase starting from the 4th fight. During his second phase, he can perform this unblockable attack called Final Fantasy that will instantly kill you, which he'll only use once he staggers you, so you also can't dodge it. If he even breaks you, it's GG's, and every time that happened to me because I wasn't paying attention to my break gauge, I was genuinely tweaking. Once you reach floor 21, you'll have to take out the death machine that's wreaking havoc in this dimension, and Gilgamesh speculates that it was made and sent by someone from a different world. The story of this DLC wraps up with the crew confirming that the Lufenians are the culprits threatening Cornelia once again. From here, you can move on to the 3rd and final expansion, or if you wish, you can continue reaching higher floors up to the 100th one. You damn sure know I didn't attempt that. I'd rather go up 100 floors in the Shinra building.
This sucks!
Upon learning that the Lufenians are planning to drive this dimension to extinction, a Moogle conveniently shows up to warn our heroes about it. It's almost like we didn't even need to go through DLC 2. The Moogle also reveals that he was the one that awakened Bahamut and then transports Jack and his friends to Central, a Lufenian city, to deal with the issue. From a gameplay perspective, this is more like it. A story-driven level that has you traversing a new location. It's the same quality of level design from the main missions of the base game, which isn't great, but I certainly prefer it over what I've been doing in the past 2 expansions. Once you reach the end of the level, the game confronts the mastermind behind all of this conundrum, and it turns out to be Jack's superior when he was still a stranger. She intends to eradicate him, or in other words, kill Chaos, to expel the darkness in Cornelia and guide it towards glory. However, Jack refutes as he already has someone else in mind to do that, so she uses a Chaos Emerald to power herself up and they get into a fight. Of course, Jack takes her down and then she starts yapping about how he'll never be safe as long as she's alive, yada yada. And Jack's like,
Shut the fuck up. That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
now that that's handled, Jack's like, alright, I'm gonna try to let the Warriors of Light kill me again. And the final mission has you play as the Warriors of Light to defeat Jack, as they're finally now strong enough to do so. At the end of it all, we are given a speech about how Jack and his allies opened a brand new chapter for Cornelia, but none will ever recall their struggles. However, within the tales of fantasy that people tell, the memory of their deeds lives on. The narrator then thanks the players for completing the game, concluding the stranger's story once and for all.
I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it.
So my biggest issue with the DLCs is that they don't really add on to the story, which I didn't think was needed in the first place. They unnecessarily stretch it out. The original ending remains the status quo. At the end of the day, the Warriors of Light still eliminate Jack. But they wanted to do this whole gratuitous plotline where Jack has to take additional steps to make them stronger because they turned out to be too weak. It was one thing that Jack had to draw them out, that was actually good. But for him to also have to mold them into powerful warriors, it's redundant and undermines the legends that they're supposed to be. If they couldn't bring light into Cornelia without external assistance upon their arrival, they're special in title only. What kind of legends are these? And the whole narration about how no one will ever acknowledge Jack's noble actions, we all got that from the base game. I even said that myself in my last video. These DLCs don't expand on the story or put it in a new lens at all. They just spell everything that was already known out. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I also didn't need to witness the Warriors killing Jack. The credits rolling before that happens with the song My Way playing in the original ending was an artistic choice that's now tarnished. The only saving grace would be whether the journey to get to this endpoint was worthwhile. Were compelling ideas explored as Jack was empowering the Warriors? For the most part, No. Although it was cool to come face to face with the Lufenian in their territory, we didn't learn anything new about them. They were already out of the picture and it could have been left at that, but because one was bitter, she went out of her way to continue meddling with Cornelia, so Jack just had to get her out of the picture physically this time around. And everything else was just fan service. Like, yeah, this is a Final Fantasy game, so we gotta have Gilgamesh make an appearance. I didn't mention this earlier, but as the gang were going through Central, they dealt with a sub-villain known as the Emperor as well, a tyrannical ruler from a different Final Fantasy universe who's also trying to conquer this dimension because that's what he does. But because the Lufenians were not allied with him or even aware of his presence, he just felt shoehorned in to appeal to the two fans of Final Fantasy II and Dissidia.
Get the fuck out of here, bitch!
With all that said, are the Stranger of Paradise DLCs worth playing? Well, yes and no. If you're a fanatic of this game's combat, there's actually a lot to get out of these expansions. They've added a handful of new jobs, expanded on the old ones, and all the challenges and boss fights that I mentioned earlier are there for you to experiment with. I personally, however, don't find it ideal for DLCs of a story-driven game to primarily expand on its gameplay, particularly just the combat in this case. The story beats here are not only sparse to simply fuel the additional gameplay content, but left a sour last impression on the overall narrative of this game for me, in which I previously did praise. So those are my thoughts on the Stranger of Paradise expansions. If you haven't and are interested in checking out my video on the base game, which I found to be a more pleasant experience, I also think it's a more fun video, I'll put the link in the description and also somewhere up on the screen in a second. Hope to see you there. Take it easy.